Hi, everyone. Good morning. Yes, I'm so glad to be here today. I actually traveled from Sweden to North Ireland and Belfast, and also today at Game of Thrones. So I'm very happy to connect with you and meet all of you. So I'm here today to share with you about how I solve my tedious, manual, and boring serverless DevOps tasks using serverless. And I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones. So when David and team invited me to speak, and I couldn't say no because I really want to be here and also connect to all of you, the community. And if you were to ask me what's my favorite character in Game of Thrones, can you guess? It's Daenerys Targaryen, because I do love dragons. So thank you so much, Serverless Belfast, for having me here today. And before I get started, I'm Jonah Andersson. I have a lot of titles, but I'm not here to present that in details. I am here to inspire serverless to all of you. But as a developer and as a DevOps engineer, I do work with full stack development in .NET, a lot of cloud infrastructure, and also DevOps engineering. And in my spare time, I do write a book. I'm writing my first book about cloud and Azure, and it's a book that's focused on inclusive, fundamentals to those that are still beginning in their journey. And then during the pandemic time, when everyone was working from home, I did start a community in mid-north Sweden. I came from the Kingdom of Sweden up north, and I started a community where we could share about cloud computing technologies and developing technologies in the cloud. So as a consultant, I am the +++ increment consultant. So what I do as a senior IT consultant in my company, Forefront Consulting in Sweden, is that I work with different technologies. I do full stack development, I do .NET, I do some help, I get to help our clients with solution architecture, DevOps. I do code some infrastructure as code using Terraform, which is very good because it's prepared for multi-cloud strategy. And I do some infrastructure management and a mix of everything, as what everyone expects a senior consultant should be doing. So today, I will be sharing with you how I solve those problems with the manual repetitive tasks that I do every day as a DevOps engineer. And of course, I do love serverless, so I'm here and I'm speaking about it today. So part of the things that I do as a DevOps engineer and release manager is to deploy microservices and distributed applications in several environments. And I have to do it a few times a week, at least 2 to 3 times a week. And also sometimes I have to do it ad hoc, depending on the demand of the business or depending on the need that we have. But these services or projects are not actually in production yet, but we will be soon. So to show you the big picture of our project, it's very interesting because it's a mix of everything, as you notice. It's all stuck, right? So we have Angular as our front-end language. We do have .NET as our backend, like a programming language. And then we use Terraform as our infrastructure as code. We have Jira as our task project management. We have Azure as our cloud providing platform, Azure DevOps for the CI/CD pipelines. So this is part of the task that I do in terms of being a release manager or doing the release cycle management. So we do this consistently, and part of the things that I really have to make sure that works properly is I do the plan that we have to deploy 2 times a week, QA deployments or UAT deployments. ad hoc deployments, which has been very consistent and often for the past weeks. So last 2 weeks, I deployed from dev to production for 2 to 3 times in the past few weeks. And we are going production actually in a few weeks or very soon. So as you see, we are trying to deliver consistently to production from dev to all environments so that we can capture the bugs that we see before we go live, and really users are really implementing this system. So I saw a problem. I'm a developer, I'm a DevOps, I see everything. I have this big picture, and I like that. I like working with the code, but I also love seeing the big picture and find solutions for it. And the problem that I saw in our project, or in what I've been doing, is that the tools that we use for the entire project, we use it all in one. I mean, they are in different places. It's everywhere, as you notice. So in our team, we do have different roles, just like the Game of Thrones kingdoms. There's different roles, different characters. They have their own characters. And just like in IT teams, regardless of what company it is, what project you're doing, cloud, on-prem, or hybrid, the teams and the people that work together are very important. So we have, in our team, including myself, we have self-organizing developers, we have external consultants, we have a DevOps engineer working with me, I also help with the cloud infrastructure. So the team is very important to make our project a success. In my deep mind, I do love putting everything in action. And I do love playing chess. So who among you plays chess here? Chess. Yes, like kingdom. Yes, so I love thinking about how things relate to each other, and how if I do this, what will happen? So in terms of the team project that we have, so experienced developers have to communicate with DevOps, consultants need to communicate with the developers that are working in the product company, business, so on and so forth. You know how it works with the agile projects. So who among you have seen this image before? Yeah, I think everyone has seen this. So this is the reality of IT projects. And I want to share with you, the first time I saw this, that was 8 years ago, when I was studying Agile System Development in Sweden. When I saw this, I thought it was just like a cartoon that I can ignore. But then I realized, after working in the IT industry as a developer, as a consultant, I realized that this still makes sense until today in each IT teams that we have. So we have a business that tells us what we need to do in the project, but a QA team or developers or those that are setting the rules in the projects may interpret it differently. So going back to the dilemma that I had. So we have our Bitbucket. We have Bitbucket for our source control repository. We have Jira for ticketing systems or project management. And then we use also DevOps for the CI/CD. And I thought, I wish we're using everything in the same place. But I have to do my task to deliver release notes and release statuses to everyone in the team. And I have to do it manually, and they're everywhere. And I realized, are we really in the cloud? Our projects are cloud native. We have, in this company, we are 16,000 employees. And this project that I'm into right now, we are a leading project that's going to have applications to follow. But I'm wondering, why is it that I have to do this manual stuff? Are we really using the technology to help me or to help us, to help the team? and we're losing time. Because if you do things manually, then it means you're losing your productivity, of course. And as a developer, I like solving problems, and I love serverless. And I'm standing here today because I love sharing knowledge, and I want to use my experience as well to be able to solve problems. And there's a quote by Jonah Andersson that says, "First, solve the problem, and then write the code." How do you usually do that? Do you write the code first and then solve the problem, or you do both? No? Volunteer? Yes. So I use my superpowers, programming, serverless, and of course, my charm, like Daenerys. Yeah, so I use my dragon, my superpowers, serverless, and my coding skills to solve the issue that I was facing, the boring tasks that I was experiencing. So the problem that I noticed is that as developers, we don't want to repeat ourselves, right? We want to write less code, we want to be effective, we don't want to waste our time when we're trying to solve things. So I identified that we're breaking the rules of dry, like breaking the rule of not repeating, like we're repeating ourselves. And then I saw that I was doing things manually, and it was boring. So using .NET and Azure Functions or serverless in Azure, I decided to jot down the idea that I had. And then in our keynote earlier today, there was like this serverless mindset. And it was really good, and I learned a lot about it, because when you have this problem, you have to find a solution. And the first step that you need to do is to think the solution that you may have in your mind. And if you have a serverless mindset, and of course, you gotta think about functions, right? So from this messy situation that I had, I decided to find a solution for it. So I came up with an idea. So what I did is that I took ours and proposed to make a proposal to my team, to my project managers, that, hey, I have this problem in DevOps, I want to solve it. But of course, before I can go to my boss and my project managers, I need to bring them the solution, right? I need to give them a big bucket and say, hey, this is how we solve the problem. So the first thing that I thought is that we're going to use serverless. Azure Durable Functions is the first option that I have, because it allows me to code serverless and stateful functions in Azure. .NET, because I know that I have used .NET for many years, and I know that I can solve problems with it. And I've been sitting with Azure as a cloud provider, and it suits all of them well, so I decided to propose that. And then in terms of our source control, our CI/CD pipelines, and also Bitbucket Cloud, they are from different places. They are separated. They do have an API, so I decided I would make use of the REST API of Bitbucket Cloud, Azure DevOps, a REST API. And then in terms of sending those release notes, once they have been captured, I'm going to use a third-party API, Twilio, or SendGrid Twilio, that's used for sending messages, calling, or scheduling events. And then there's a service in Azure for enterprise messaging called Azure Service Bus as well, for delivering those key messages from the events. So this is Azure Service Bus. How many of you have heard of Service Bus? Oh, okay, yes, we have some, yes, great. So Azure Service Bus is an enterprise messaging broker in Azure that allows you, or allows us developer to connect applications and distributed services or APIs between each other. And in Service Bus, there's queues and topics, and it has this list of features like scheduling, or if you want to do duplicate detection, or if you want to do pub/sub, filtering, and all those other great stuff. And I'm sure AWS also have great services like this as well. So to those of you that haven't heard of Durable Functions, as mentioned, it is an extension of Azure Functions that allows us to create stateful workflows. And what does it mean? Why is it called durable? So it's called durable because we as developer, we focus on writing the code, and we don't need to think about the state. So it's stateful. So it checkpoints and manages the state for us. We just need to write the code, know what kind of pattern that you need to do to solve your problem, and then you're able to code it in your favorite language. So basically, Azure Functions is your code that we write, the events, because it's event-driven, triggered by events that happens, and then the data that you want to in and out or pass into other applications or other functions. So in durable functions, there are different patterns or design patterns. To those that are new or never heard of it before, I thought I would give you an overview. So there are 6. So the first one is the function chaining pattern. So as you notice, it's a sequence of functions. And then the next one is the fan-out, fan-in pattern. So you trigger it with an event, and then you kickstart the orchestration, run things in parallel, and then you aggregate the result. And then there is the async HTTP API for stateful HTTP API requests. There's the monitoring pattern, commonly used for monitoring like events for like logs and what's happening in the system. Human interaction, it's a pattern that's being used for if you need a human interaction in your events, or you can set a durable timer. And then there's also the aggregator pattern. So the function chaining in action works like this. So let's just say I have an HTTP trigger, or a data that came in an Azure Cosmos database. So the orchestration gets started, and the activity 1 is scheduled. Let's just say we have 2 tasks to do, very simple workflow. And then the orchestrator sleeps when the activity 1 is working on its task. The activity 1 is done, and then the orchestrator wakes up. When the orchestrator wakes up, the 2 is scheduled, orchestrator sleeps, activity 2 is done, and then the orchestration is completed. Very simple example. And that is just one play, one instance, one kick, or one event. And once an event happens again, it will be restarted, the entire workflow, and it will be replayed, and it's stateful. So the orchestrator can be a sleepyhead, like my dog. I have a Labradoodle dog, as cute as that, but he's a big one now, like this. So the orchestrator, it can be really a sleepyhead. It sleeps when you're not using it, but it's good because we can save costs. In serverless, one of the benefits of it is that you're only paying for the instances or the functions that are running. So it also works the same in Azure, and I'm sure in all cloud providers as well. So when I propose those solutions and all the things that I showed to you right now, I propose it to my boss, to the team leaders that makes decision. He said, "That's a great idea, Jonah. Let's do it." And what they really meant is, you do it, because you're the one that can code. You're the one that can do serverless. You have this great architecture or solution. So I have to do it, because it's my solution. I want to solve my problems, and I like coding serverless. But then I have to decide what pattern that works. So I decided I would use the fan-out, fan-in pattern, which is this one. So I have an event, which is the releases and the commits from the dev environment, and then I'm going to aggregate them and then follow the same logic that I want to do. So in terms of getting the commits from the Bitbucket cloud, so I would have a timer trigger in here that runs daily at midnight, and then I use the fan-out and fan-in pattern to check on the status of those services or microservices that we have in our applications or project. And then that kickstarts the orchestration function or the orchestrator. It runs several functions or tasks in parallel in this workflow. And then when it's done, it's gonna generate or coded the logic to generate the release notes in that function, which will then be sent as a service message queue to Service Bus. And then use Twilio SendGrid for sending the messages as like SMS if I want notice, or sending it as an email. So this is how it looks. A mini function, the code looks when in terms of calling the Azure DevOps API in C#.NET. So as you can see here on line 64 to 71, this is where I'm calling the REST API. And since I'm not allowed to show the entire code, I had to blur it. Yes, but this is how we call the DevOps REST API through the C# code. And this is also another example for the getting of the commits. So what I'm doing here is I'm trying to get the commits between the latest release and the hit commits by passing in the application name. So we have like several applications, about 15 or 20, and then what kind of development environment we want the release notes from. So in terms of scheduling the release notes by email, so I'm using, once I get the serverless service bus queue trigger, it kickstarts the orchestrator function. And then what I do is I'm going to send out all the emails to all the team, and then I will also receive those notes as a release administrator. So, if possible, if you have problems or tasks that you think is so boring and so manual, but you have the power to change it using your programming skills and serverless, solve it by automating it. So, work less with serverless. And if you want to learn more about durable functions, Azure DevOps, and .NET, feel free to scan the QR, or I can share it also with you. And thank you so much for having me today. And this is not a dragon, but this is my dragon or dog, Lawrence. Thank you so much.